The summer heat was already making the concrete floor of Precision Auto Works feel like a frying pan, even though it was only 8 in the morning. Lisa wiped the sweat from her forehead as she walked through the big metal doors of the repair shop for the first time. The smell of motor oil and gasoline hit her nose immediately, mixing with the sound of air tools and engines running in the back. She was 19 years old and nervous about starting her new summer job. Her dad, David, had worked here for 15 years, fixing cars and trucks for people all around town. He was known as one of the best mechanics in the city, someone who could make any engine purr like a kitten. But Lisa knew that didn't mean things were always easy for him at work. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" David had asked her the night before. "You could work at that office job your cousin found instead. Nice and clean, good pay too." But Lisa wanted to be here. She had been around cars her whole life, watching her dad work magic under the hood since she could barely see over the fender. While other kids played with dolls or video games, she was learning the difference between a wrench and a socket set. The shop owner, Mr. Frank, came walking over as soon as he saw her. He was a big man with grease under his fingernails and a baseball cap that looked like it hadn't been washed in months. His smile seemed friendly enough, but Lisa caught something in his eyes that made her stomach feel tight. "So you're David's girl," he said, looking her up and down. "Heard you're going to help out with parts and paperwork this summer. Good, good. We can always use someone to keep the office organized and answer phones." Lisa nodded politely, but inside she felt a little disappointed. She had hoped maybe she could learn more about the actual repair work, not just shuffle papers around. Her dad had always told her to start slow and prove herself first. The other mechanics were already busy with their morning jobs. There was Tony, who had been working on transmissions longer than Lisa had been alive. Then there was Jake, a younger guy who specialized in electrical problems and always had country music playing from his portable radio. They all seemed nice enough, giving her quick waves and hellos as she followed Mr. Frank to the small office. In the corner, "Here's where you'll spend most of your time," Mr. Frank explained, pointing to a desk covered with invoices, work orders, and parts catalogs. "When customers call, you take their information. When we need parts, you look them up and place the orders. Simple stuff." Lisa spent her first few hours getting familiar with the computer system and phone procedures. It wasn't hard work, but she found herself constantly looking out the office window at the repair bays where the real action was happening. She watched her dad diagnose a problem with a pickup truck, his experienced hands moving confidently around the engine, while he listened carefully to every sound it made. During lunch break, she sat with her dad at the small table in the break room. The other mechanics had gone to the diner down the street, leaving them alone to talk. "How's it going so far?" David asked, unwrapping his sandwich. "Fine, I guess. Just taking calls and filing papers. But Dad, I've been thinking. Remember that engineering degree I just finished? Maybe I could help with some of the technical stuff too." David's face got serious. "Lisa, I know you're smart, probably smarter than half the people in this shop. But you got to understand how things work around here. Mr. Frank, he's not a bad man, but he has his ways of thinking. You prove yourself, with the simple jobs first, then maybe later we can talk about the other stuff." Lisa understood what her dad wasn't saying directly. She had grown up hearing stories about the comments he sometimes got from customers who expected their mechanic to look different, about the times he had to work twice as hard to get the same respect other people got automatically. She didn't want to make things harder for him, but she also felt like she was wasting her education sitting behind that desk. The afternoon brought a steady stream of phone calls and parts orders. Lisa handled everything efficiently, but her real attention was on the sounds coming from the shop floor. She could identify different engine problems just by listening. That grinding noise from Bay 3 meant worn brake pads. The irregular idle from Bay 1 suggested a vacuum leak. The rattling from Bay 4 sounded like a loose timing chain. Around 3 o'clock, everything changed. A bright red car rolled into the shop on the back of an expensive-looking tow truck. Even from the office window, Lisa could tell this wasn't just any ordinary vehicle. The sleek lines and aggressive stance screamed classic muscle car. The tow truck driver was extra careful setting it down, like he was handling a piece of fine art. The car's owner stepped out of a black luxury sedan that had followed the tow truck. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people, made in a month, and his watch caught the light every time he moved his wrist. Lisa had never seen him before, but she could tell he was the type of person who was used to getting exactly what he wanted, exactly when he wanted it. Mr. Frank came, rushing over, practically tripping over himself to greet the man. Lisa couldn't hear their conversation from the office, but she could see Mr. Frank nodding eagerly and shaking the man's hand multiple times. When they opened the hood of the red car, even from across the shop, Lisa could see Mr. Frank's expression change from confidence to concern. Her dad walked over to take a look, along with Tony and Jake. All four men stood around the engine bay, pointing at different parts and shaking their heads. Lisa had seen that look before. It was the expression mechanics got when they knew they were looking at a really expensive problem. The wealthy customer left after about an hour of discussion, but not before Lisa saw him pointing his finger firmly at Mr. Frank and saying something that made the shop owner's face turn pale. After the man drove away in his luxury sedan, Mr. Frank gathered all the mechanics around the red car for what looked like a very serious conversation. Lisa tried to focus on her paperwork, but she kept glancing up at the group of men huddled around the mysterious car. She could see her dad scratching his head, which he only did when he encountered something really puzzling. Tony was making notes on a piece of paper, and Jake had already started hooking up diagnostic equipment. At 5 o'clock, as the shop was closing up, Lisa finally got a chance to ask her dad about the red car. "What's the story with that fancy car that came in today?" she asked as they walked to his truck. David let out a long sigh. "That's a 1967 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500. Probably worth more money than I'll make in the next 5 years. The owner says it just stopped running right one day, lost all its power. He's already taken it to 2 other shops and nobody can figure out what's wrong with it. So why did he bring it here? Because he heard I'm good with old Ford motors. Problem is, this isn't just any old Ford motor. It's got some special parts and modifications that make it tricky to work on. And the customer, well, let's just say he's not the patient type. He wants it fixed by the end of next week, or he's going to start making legal trouble for whoever can't get it running." Lisa felt a little chill run down her spine. She had grown up around her dad's work long enough to know that when wealthy customers started talking about lawyers, it usually meant trouble for small shop owners like Mr. Frank. "Do you think you can fix it?" she asked. "Honestly? I don't know. Me and the other guys will give it our best shot. But sometimes these old performance cars have problems that are just about impossible to track down, especially when other mechanics have already been digging around in there, maybe changing things or disconnecting stuff." That night, Lisa lay in bed thinking about the red car and the worried expression on her dad's face. She had always admired how confident he was around engines, how he seemed to have an instinct for finding problems that other people missed. If he was concerned about this repair job, it must be really serious. She also thought about her engineering classes and all the things she had learned about engine design and troubleshooting. Her professors had taught her diagnostic techniques that went beyond the traditional trial and error methods most mechanics used. She had studied the exact type of engine that was probably in that Shelby, learned about its unique characteristics and common failure points. But she was just the parts girl, the mechanic's daughter who answered phones and filed paperwork. Nobody expected her to have opinions about complex engine problems. Nobody even knew about her education and training. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, Lisa couldn't stop thinking about that red car and wondering if maybe, just maybe, she might be able to help her dad figure out what was wrong with it. She had no idea that within a few days, she would get a chance to do exactly that, in a way that would surprise everyone in the shop, including herself. 3 days had passed since the red Shelby arrived at the shop, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lisa watched from her desk as her dad, Tony, and Jake took turns working on the car, each one looking more frustrated than the last. She could hear them talking in hushed voices during their breaks, and none of it sounded good. "We've checked everything twice," Tony was saying to her dad during lunch on Wednesday. "Fuel system's clean, spark plugs are new, timing's perfect. This thing should be running like a dream, but it acts like it's got no power at all." Jake nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "I even called my buddy who works on classic cars over in the next town. He's never seen anything like this either. Says maybe we should just tell the customer it needs a complete engine rebuild, but you know what Mr. Frank said about that." Lisa knew exactly what Mr. Frank had said. She had heard him on the phone with the car's owner yesterday, promising that his best mechanic would have the problem solved by Friday. The customer had made it very clear that if the car wasn't fixed by then, he would take his business elsewhere and make sure everyone in town knew that Precision Auto Works couldn't handle quality repairs. That afternoon, Mr. Frank brought in a specialist from the city. The man charged $200 just to look at the car, spent 3 hours taking it apart, and left shaking his head. "Sorry," he told Mr. Frank loud enough for everyone to hear. "This one's got me stumped too. Sometimes these old performance cars just develop problems that are impossible to find." Lisa could see the panic starting to creep into Mr. Frank's eyes. This wasn't just about one repair job anymore. Word was already getting around town about the mysterious car that nobody could fix. If they failed, it would hurt the shop's reputation with other customers who had expensive cars. Thursday morning brought even worse news. The customer called bright and early, demanding to know why his car wasn't ready yet. Lisa answered the phone and had to listen to him yell for 5 minutes about incompetent mechanics and small-town repair shops that didn't know quality work when they saw it. She transferred the call to Mr. Frank, who spent the next 20 minutes trying to calm the man down and buy more time. After hanging up, Mr. Frank looked like he wanted to punch something. He walked out to the shop floor where all the mechanics were gathered around the Shelby, staring at it like it was some kind of puzzle they couldn't solve. "All right, listen up," Mr. Frank announced, his voice carrying across the entire shop. "We've got until closing time tomorrow to figure this thing out. I don't care if we have to take the whole engine apart piece by piece. Somebody better find what's wrong with this car, or we're all going to look like fools." Lisa had been trying to concentrate on her paperwork, but she kept finding herself drawn to the conversations about the car. During her lunch break, she walked over to where it sat in the middle bay and took a closer look. The engine was beautiful, all chrome and polished aluminum, but she could see signs of the work that had already been done. Wires had been disconnected and reconnected, parts had been removed and replaced, and there were tool marks on several components. She thought about the diagnostic procedures she had learned in college, the systematic approach to finding problems that her professors had drilled into every student. Most mechanics, even good ones like her dad, relied on experience and intuition. They looked for the most common problems first, then worked their way through a mental checklist of possibilities. But sometimes that wasn't enough. "What do you think, Lisa?" She turned around to find her dad standing behind her, a tired smile on his face. "I think it's a beautiful car," she said carefully. "Yeah, it is. Too bad we can't figure out what's eating at it. You know, I've been working on cars for 20 years, and this is the first time I've run into something that's got me completely stumped." Lisa wanted to say something helpful, but she knew she had to be careful. Her dad had specifically told her to keep quiet about her engineering background, at least until she had proven herself with the basic office work. Friday morning arrived with dark clouds threatening rain, which seemed fitting for the mood in the shop. Mr. Frank was pacing around like a caged animal, checking his watch every few minutes and making phone calls to parts suppliers, hoping someone might have a magic solution to their problem. The other mechanics were taking one last shot at the Shelby, but Lisa could tell their hearts weren't really in it anymore. They had tried everything they could think of, and nothing had worked. At this point, they were just going through the motions, hoping for a miracle. Around noon, the customer called again. This time, Mr. Frank put the call on speakerphone so everyone could hear exactly what they were dealing with. "I've been patient with you people for a whole week," the man's voice crackled through the shop. "I was told this place had the best mechanics in town, but apparently that was wrong information. I'm coming in at 5 o'clock to pick up my car, and if it's not running perfectly, I'm taking it somewhere else and telling everyone I know about your shop's incompetence." The phone went dead, leaving everyone standing in uncomfortable silence. Mr. Frank's face was red with embarrassment and anger. He looked around at his mechanics, then his eyes landed on Lisa, who was standing in the doorway of the office, having come out to listen to the phone call like everyone else. "You know what?" he said, his voice getting louder. "I'm sick of this. We've got 3 experienced mechanics and a specialist who couldn't figure out this car. Maybe we're all thinking too hard about it." He walked over to where Lisa was standing, and she could see something brewing in his expression that made her nervous. "Lisa, you've been watching us work on this car all week. You grew up around this stuff, right? Your dad's been teaching you about engines since you were little?" Lisa nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. "Well then, maybe you've got some ideas we haven't thought of. I mean, we've tried everything else, right guys?" Tony and Jake exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with what was happening. Her dad stepped forward, looking worried. "Mr. Frank, Lisa's just here for the summer to help with office work. She doesn't have experience with this kind of repair." But Mr. Frank wasn't listening. The stress of the week had gotten to him, and now he was looking for someone to blame, or maybe just looking to make a point about knowing your place. No, I think this is perfect," he said, his voice carrying a tone that made everyone in the shop stop what they were doing. "David's little girl has been watching us struggle with this car all week. Maybe she thinks she knows something we don't." Lisa felt her stomach drop. She could see where this was heading, and it wasn't anywhere good. "In fact," Mr. Frank continued, getting louder, "why don't we give Lisa a chance to show us what she's learned from hanging around the shop all these years? Maybe the daughter of our best mechanic has some family talent we don't know about." The shop had gotten completely quiet, except for the sound of an air compressor cycling on and off. Everyone was staring at Lisa, waiting to see what would happen. "Next, Mr. Frank," her dad said quietly. "I don't think this is a good idea." "Why not?" Mr. Frank shot back. "We've got nothing to lose at this point. The customer's coming at 5 and we're out of options. So here's what we're going to do." He pointed directly at Lisa, his finger shaking slightly. "You've got until 5 o'clock to fix what 3 master mechanics couldn't figure out. If you can get that car running right, I'll personally apologize to you in front of everyone. But when you can't do it, maybe you'll understand why some jobs require real experience and training." Lisa felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Everyone was staring at her, waiting for her response. Her dad looked mortified. Tony was shaking his head, and Jake was studying his shoes like they were the most interesting things he'd ever seen. She knew Mr. Frank was trying to embarrass her, to put her in her place and show everyone what happened when people got ideas above their station. He expected her to back down, to admit she was just a parts girl who didn't belong anywhere near a complex repair job. But as she stood there looking at the red Shelby, something clicked in her mind. All those hours studying engine design, all those diagnostic procedures she had memorized, all that knowledge she had been keeping hidden suddenly felt like it was burning to get out. "Okay," she said quietly. "What?" Mr. Frank looked surprised. "I said, okay, I'll try to fix your car." The silence in the shop was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. Her dad's eyes went wide, and she could see him trying to figure out if he should step in and stop this whole thing. "Lisa," he said softly, "you don't have to do this." But Lisa was already walking toward the Shelby, her mind racing with possibilities. She had been studying this problem from a distance all week, and she had some ideas that nobody had tried. Yet, maybe they would work, maybe they wouldn't. But she was tired of pretending to be less than she was. "I'll need to see all the diagnostic reports and work orders from this week," she told Mr. Frank, "and I'll need access to the car and the tools." Mr. Frank looked like he couldn't believe what was happening, but he nodded. "Fine. You've got exactly 4 hours. Don't say I didn't give you a fair chance." As Lisa rolled up her sleeves and walked toward the car that had stumped everyone else, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. The clock on the shop wall read 1:15 when Lisa pulled the first diagnostic report from the stack of papers Mr. Frank had handed her. She could feel everyone's eyes on her as she spread the documents across the workbench next to the red Shelby. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she forced herself to focus on the task ahead. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" her dad whispered as he came up beside her. "It's not too late to change your mind. Mr. Frank's just blowing off steam because he's stressed." Lisa looked up at her father's worried face. She wanted to tell him about her engineering degree, about all the classes she had taken on advanced diagnostics and engine design. But this wasn't the time for explanations. She had less than 4 hours to prove herself, and every minute counted. "I'm sure, Dad. Just trust me on this one." David nodded slowly and stepped back, but Lisa could see he wasn't going anywhere. He positioned himself where he could watch her work, while also keeping an eye on Mr. Frank, who was standing by the office. With his arms crossed, clearly expecting this whole thing to be over quickly, Lisa started by reading through every single diagnostic report from the past week. Tony had checked the fuel system 3 times, replacing the fuel filter and cleaning the injectors. Jake had tested all the electrical components from the ignition coils to the computer sensors. Her dad had gone through the entire intake system, looking for vacuum leaks or airflow problems. The specialist from the city had performed compression tests and checked the timing chain. On paper, everything looked perfect. The engine should have been running like new. But Lisa remembered something from her thermodynamics class that her professor had repeated over and over. When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however unlikely, must be the truth. Everyone had been looking for common problems, the kind of issues that usually cause these symptoms. But what if this wasn't a common problem? She walked around the car slowly, looking at it from every angle. The Shelby GT500 was a special car, built for performance with modifications that regular mechanics didn't see very often. Her engineering professors had used this exact model as a case study in advanced engine design, talking about the unique challenges of high-performance motors. "What are you thinking?" Jake asked, coming over with a curious expression. "I'm thinking everyone's been looking in the right places for the wrong problem," Lisa said, still studying the engine bay. She picked up a flashlight and started examining areas that hadn't been touched during the previous diagnostic work. While everyone else had focused on the obvious systems, she was looking for something more subtle, something that would only show up under very specific conditions. 20 minutes into her investigation, Lisa found something interesting. There was a small oil stain on the engine block right near where the oil pressure sensor was mounted. It wasn't much, just a few drops, but it was in a place where there shouldn't be any oil at all. "Dad, can you help me get this sensor out?" she called. David came over with the right tools, and together they carefully removed the oil pressure sensor. What they found underneath made Lisa's heart race. There was oil where it shouldn't be, which meant there was a crack or leak somewhere in the oil gallery system. "That's weird," Tony said, looking over their shoulders. "We checked oil pressure and it was fine." "Oil pressure can be fine even with a small crack," Lisa explained, remembering her fluid dynamics classes. "But if the crack is in the right place, it can cause all kinds of strange problems that don't show up on normal tests." She asked Jake to help her remove more components so she could get a better look at the oil gallery passages inside the engine block. This required taking apart parts that the other mechanics had left alone, assuming they weren't related to the problem. As they worked, word started spreading around the shop about what Lisa was doing. A few mechanics from other shops in the area stopped by, having heard about the impossible car that nobody could fix. Instead of the usual friendly visits, though, these guys seemed more interested in watching the young woman who thought she could succeed where experienced professionals had failed. "Heard David's daughter is trying to fix the Shelby," one of them said to Mr. Frank, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's pretty bold considering nobody else could figure it out." Mr. Frank's face got red again. Lisa could see he was embarrassed that word was getting out about the challenge he had issued. Having other mechanics watch this whole thing play out was making him look foolish, whether Lisa succeeded or failed. "She's got until 5 o'clock, Mr. Frank announced to the growing crowd of observers. "Then we'll see what all this fuss is about." Lisa tried to ignore the comments and focus on her work, but it was getting harder as more people gathered around. Some were genuinely curious about her approach, while others seemed to be waiting for her to fail so they could have a good story to tell back at their own shops. By 3 o'clock, Lisa had found what she was looking for. Deep inside the engine block, in a place that couldn't be seen without removing several major components, there was a hairline crack in one of the oil gallery passages. It was so small that it wouldn't show up on a compression test, and it wouldn't cause obvious oil pressure problems. But it would create just enough internal leakage to throw off the engine's performance in very subtle ways. "There it is," she said, pointing the flashlight beam at the tiny crack. Her dad squinted at the spot she was indicating. "I'll be damned. How did you know to look there?" Lisa wanted to explain about the engineering principles that had led her to this discovery, but she kept her answer simple. "Just seemed like the kind of place where problems hide." The crack explained everything. It was causing a small amount of oil to leak into places where it didn't belong, which was affecting the engine's breathing and combustion efficiency. The symptoms were so subtle that they could easily be mistaken for dozens of other problems, which is why 3 different mechanics had been chasing their tails all week. But finding the problem was only half the battle. Now Lisa had to figure out how to fix it. "This is going to require a pretty specialized repair," she told her dad quietly. "We'll need to machine a custom sleeve to fit over the crack, then do some precision welding to seal everything up." David's eyes widened. "Lisa, that's way beyond anything we usually do here. That kind of work requires equipment and skills that most shops don't have." Lisa looked around the shop, taking inventory of the tools and equipment available. They had a decent machine shop set up in the back, with a lathe and milling machine that Mr. Frank used for custom work. She had learned precision machining as part of her engineering program, along with the welding techniques that would be needed for this repair. "I think I can do it," she said more confidently than she felt. The crowd of observers had grown even larger as word spread about the young woman who claimed to have found the problem that stumped everyone else. Lisa could hear whispered conversations and skeptical comments, but she forced herself to concentrate on the task ahead. She spent the next hour carefully measuring the damaged area and calculating the exact dimensions for the repair sleeve. This required math skills that went way beyond what most mechanics used in their daily work, involving tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch and stress calculations to make sure the repair would hold up under the engine's operating conditions. "What's she doing now?" one of the visiting mechanics asked Mr. Frank. "Looks like she's trying to machine some kind of custom part," Mr. Frank replied, sounding doubtful. "Though I don't know where she learned that kind of precision work." Lisa could hear the skepticism in his voice, but she kept working. She had learned these techniques in college, in classes that most mechanics never took. Her professors had drilled into their students that engineering wasn't just about theory. It was about being able to solve real-world problems with practical solutions. The machining work took another hour, with Lisa carefully shaping a small sleeve that would fit perfectly over the cracked area. She checked her measurements multiple times, knowing that even the smallest error would make the repair useless. As 4:30 approached, the tension in the shop was getting thick. The customer would be arriving in 30 minutes, expecting his car to be fixed or ready to take his business elsewhere. Lisa still had to install her custom part and weld it in place, then reassemble everything and test the engine. "You're cutting it pretty close," Jake said, watching her work on the final welding. "I know," Lisa replied, concentrating on making perfect welds that would hold up under pressure. "But I think this is going to work." The welding required skills that she had learned in her advanced manufacturing classes, techniques for working. With the special alloys used in high-performance engines, most mechanics could do basic welding, but this repair demanded precision that went beyond everyday automotive work. By 4:50, Lisa had the engine back together and was ready for the moment of truth. Everyone in the shop gathered around as she turned the key for the first time. The engine turned over slowly, then caught and settled into a smooth idle. But the real test would be how it performed under load, whether the subtle power loss that had been plaguing it was finally fixed. Lisa revved the engine carefully, listening to every sound and watching the gauges. The Shelby responded immediately, with none of the hesitation and rough running that had characterized it all week. The exhaust note was crisp and clean, exactly what you'd expect from a perfectly tuned high-performance motor. Just as the engine settled into a perfect idle, the customer's black sedan pulled into the shop parking lot. The wealthy customer stepped out of his black sedan with the same impatient energy he had shown all week. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed, and his gold watch caught the late afternoon sunlight as he walked toward the shop entrance. Lisa could see through the big windows that he was checking his phone and looking annoyed, probably expecting to find his car still broken and ready to take his business elsewhere. The shop had gone completely quiet, except for the smooth purring of the Shelby's engine. Everyone was frozen in place, waiting to see what would happen next. Lisa's hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of completing the repair just in time, but the sound of that perfectly tuned motor gave her confidence. Mr. Frank walked over to meet the customer at the door, his face showing a mixture of nervousness and surprise. He had clearly expected this meeting to go very differently. Good evening, Mr. Richardson, Mr. Frank said, extending his hand. I think you're going to be pleased with what we've accomplished today. Mr. Richardson looked skeptical as he shook hands. Frankly, I'm not expecting much. 3 different mechanics have looked at this car and nobody could figure out what was wrong. I'm mainly here to pick it up and take it somewhere that actually knows how to work on quality automobiles. Lisa felt her stomach tighten, but she forced herself to stay calm. The engine was running perfectly, better than it had in months according to the diagnostic readings. But she knew that proving it would require more than just letting it idle in the shop. Actually, Mr. Frank said, glancing back at Lisa with an expression she couldn't quite read, we did manage to identify and fix the problem. Would you like to take a look? Mr. Richardson followed Mr. Frank into the shop, his eyes immediately going to his red Shelby. The car was sitting in the middle bay with its hood up, engine running smoothly. But Lisa could see from his expression that he wasn't convinced yet. It sounds good, he admitted, but it sounded fine when it was idling before too. The problem was that it had no power when I tried to drive it. Lost acceleration, rough running under load, all kinds of issues that made it barely drivable. Lisa stepped forward, wiping her hands on a shop rag. Would you like me to explain what we found and how we fixed it? Mr. Richardson looked surprised to see a young woman speaking up about his car repair. His eyes went from Lisa to Mr. Frank and back again, clearly wondering what was going on. This is Lisa, Mr. Frank said, his voice sounding strange. She's the one who figured out your car's problem. Her? Mr. Richardson's eyebrows went up. No offense, but you're telling me that a girl who looks like she's barely out of high school solved something that stumped 3 master mechanics? Lisa felt the familiar sting of being judged by her appearance, but she had dealt with this kind of reaction before. I know it sounds unlikely, she said calmly, but sometimes fresh eyes can spot things that others miss. She walked over to the engine and pointed to the area where she had made the repair. Your car had a hairline crack in the oil gallery inside the engine block. It was so small that it didn't show up on compression tests or cause obvious oil pressure problems, but it was creating internal leakage that affected the engine's performance in very subtle ways. Mr. Richardson leaned in to look where she was pointing, his expression becoming more interested. A crack in the oil gallery? How is that possible? This engine was completely rebuilt less than 2 years ago. Sometimes it's a manufacturing defect that doesn't show up until later, Lisa explained. The crack was in a place where it could only be seen after removing several major components. That's why the other mechanics missed it. They were looking for more common problems. She went on to describe the custom sleeve she had machined and the precision welding technique she had used to make the repair. As she talked, Mr. Richardson's expression changed from skepticism to genuine interest. He was clearly someone who appreciated technical skill and attention to detail. That's pretty impressive work, he said when she finished explaining. But the real test is how it drives. Can we take it for a test run? Of course, Lisa replied, but I think you'll find it runs better now than it has since you bought it. Mr. Richardson got behind the wheel and started the engine. The Shelby responded immediately, settling into a perfect idle with none of the rough edges that had plagued it before. He revved it a few times, listening carefully to the sound, then put it in gear and drove slowly out of the shop. Everyone gathered around the open bay door to watch as he took the car through its paces in the parking lot. First he accelerated gently, then more aggressively, testing the power delivery that had been missing all week. The Shelby responded like a completely different car, with smooth acceleration and none of the hesitation that had made it nearly undrivable. After a few minutes, Mr. Richardson drove back into the shop with a huge smile on his face. I can't believe it, he said as he got out of the car. It hasn't run this well since I bought it. What did you say your name was? Lisa, she replied, still hardly believing that her repair had worked so perfectly. Well, Lisa, I owe you an apology for doubting you. This is exactly the kind of diagnostic work and precision repair that I was hoping to find. He turned to Mr. Frank. I have to ask, though, where did she learn to do this kind of work? This isn't the type of repair most mechanics could pull off. Lisa glanced at her dad, who was standing nearby with a proud but worried expression. She had managed to fix the car without revealing her engineering background. But now she was being asked direct questions about her qualifications. "I studied mechanical engineering in college," she said simply. "I just graduated this spring with my degree." The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a pin drop. Every person in the shop was staring at her with expressions ranging from surprise to complete shock. Mr. Frank's mouth was hanging open, and even her dad looked stunned. "You have an engineering degree?" Mr. Frank finally managed to say. "Yes, sir. I graduated top of my class from the State University. I've been studying engine design and advanced diagnostics for the past 4 years." Tony was the first to break the shocked silence. "Well, I'll be damned. That explains how you knew to look in places the rest of us never thought of." Jake started laughing and shaking his head. "Here we all were, thinking you were just the parts girl. And you've got more education than all of us put together." Mr. Richardson was looking back and forth between Lisa and Mr. Frank with growing understanding. "So let me get this straight. You had a qualified engineer working in your shop, and you had her answering phones and filing paperwork while 3 mechanics struggled with a problem she could have solved in the first day?" Mr. Frank's face was getting red again, but this time it was from embarrassment rather than anger. "I didn't know about her education. She never mentioned it. Because you told me to keep quiet about it," Lisa's dad said, stepping forward. "You said she needed to prove herself with simple work first. Learn the business from the ground up." The visiting mechanics who had been watching the whole drama unfold were whispering among themselves, clearly amazed by what they had witnessed. Word would spread quickly through the local automotive community about the young engineer who had solved the impossible repair. Mr. Richardson turned back to Lisa with obvious respect. "I have to say I'm impressed not just by your technical skills, but by your professionalism. You could have thrown your boss under the bus just now, but you handled that with real class." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "I own 3 classic car restoration shops in the state, and I'm always looking for people with your combination of education and practical ability. If you ever want to work on high-end restorations full-time, give me a call. I'll pay you twice what you could make anywhere else." Lisa took the card, feeling overwhelmed by how quickly everything was changing. An hour ago, she had been the parts girl that nobody took seriously. Now she was being offered a dream job by a wealthy customer who clearly knew quality work when he saw it. Mr. Frank cleared his throat awkwardly. "Lisa, I owe you a serious apology. What I did today was wrong, and I'm embarrassed by my behavior. You proved yourself in a way that none of us expected, and you handled it with more maturity than I showed." He paused, looking around at all the people watching this conversation. "I'd like to offer you a position as our lead diagnostic technician, with full mechanic pay and the respect you deserve. That is, if you're willing to stay after how I treated you." Lisa looked at her dad, who was beaming with pride despite everything that had happened. Then she looked around at Tony and Jake, who were both nodding encouragingly. These people had become like family over the years, even if they hadn't always understood her potential. "I appreciate the job offer, Mr. Richardson," she said, "and I might take you up on it someday. But right now I think I'd like to stay here and help this shop learn some new diagnostic techniques. Maybe I can teach some classes on advanced troubleshooting. Help everyone expand their skills." Mr. Richardson smiled and shook her hand. "That's a generous attitude after what you've been through today. But the offer stands whenever you're ready for it." As he prepared to leave with his perfectly running Shelby, he turned back one more time. "You know, I've been in the automotive business for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what happened here today. You've got a special talent, young lady. Don't let anyone convince you to hide it." After Mr. Richardson drove away, the crowd of visitors gradually dispersed, each one carrying the story of what they had witnessed. Lisa found herself surrounded by her co-workers, all of them eager to hear more about her engineering background and the techniques she had used. "So what's next?" her dad asked, putting his arm around her shoulders. Lisa looked around the shop that had been her second home for so many years, thinking about all the possibilities that lay ahead. "I guess we'll see, but I have a feeling things are going to be a lot different around here from now on." And as the sun set on what had started as an impossible challenge, Lisa realized that sometimes the best way to prove yourself is to stop hiding who you really are and let your abilities speak for themselves.